On a mountain named Wild Wolf, a place known as a familiar hunting ground for rookie adventurers, a middle-aged man was diligently gathering medicinal herbs. After some time, he had collected enough to complete his quest and even kept a portion for himself. That man was Kane, a D-rank adventurer with over 20 years of experience hunting for medicinal plants. Before returning to the guild, Kane decided to perform a ritual offering to the mountain goddess. He offered wild herb branches and a bit of wolf essence to a small statue of the deity that he had built himself at the shrine. Although he wasn't sure if the mountain goddess could truly hear him, Kane still hoped in silence. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew past, rustling the leaves of a strange tree. Kane was surprised, wondering if the tree had just mysteriously appeared, because despite wandering here for many years, he had never seen it before. Unexpectedly, a fruit fell down. When Kane took a closer look at the fallen fruit, he realized it was a resurrection fruit. This was not only the main ingredient for crafting resurrection potions, but it was also incredibly valuable. Immediately after, the tree was instantly enveloped in a mystical mist and gradually disappeared. As he grasped the situation, Kane lost his composure. The money from selling this resurrection fruit would be enough for him to buy his dream house and help those in need, and even allow him to leave the adventurer's life forever. But as memories of his adventures surfaced, a voice suddenly pulled him back to reality. In front of him was a girl named Altina. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she broke into sobs upon seeing the resurrection fruit in Kane's hand. Desperate to save a friend who was on the verge of death, the girl begged Kane to give her the resurrection fruit. Altina fumbled through her pockets, trying to give Kane some money, but all she had left were her last 3 silver coins. Panicked, she remembered that she had spent most of her money buying other ingredients for the resurrection potion. Seeing her worried and afraid, Kane suddenly recalled a painful memory, a time when he too lacked enough money or ingredients, leading to the unavoidable death of a loved one. Without a moment's hesitation, Kane handed the resurrection fruit to Altina. She looked at him in astonishment, unable to believe he was willing to give up a life-changing opportunity just to help her. Kane gently told her never to give up on her friend. Seeing her suspicious gaze, Kane smiled and accepted the 3 silver coins as an exchange for the resurrection fruit. Kane gently patted Altina on the head, softly urging her to save her friend quickly before sunset. Afterward, he decided to return to the guild, leaving her alone in the forest. As soon as Kane was gone, Altina breathed a sigh of relief and clutched the resurrection fruit tightly to her chest. The next day, the innkeeper noticed that Kane seemed much more cheerful. He mentioned that he'd earned a little extra money the day before and had been invited for drinks by a C-rank party after they took down a large bear. Because of that, Kane had enjoyed a satisfying barbecue feast. The landlady joked that perhaps the gods were looking out for him, even though he still hadn't found a wife. Kane just laughed heartily and walked out. As soon as he stepped into the Adventurers Guild of Earn Town, the other adventurers immediately started mocking him, calling him the weed picker, because he was still just a D rank after all these years. Suddenly, Elena, the guild receptionist, called out to Kane in front of everyone. She announced that he had just received a special request from the famous S-rank party, the Blooming Rosen Maidens. Kane was stunned because he had never even known of this party's existence. Elena explained that the Blooming Rosen Maidens consisted of 3 members: the Pure Saintess, the Almighty Sorceress, and the Swift Sword Princess, known as the continent's strongest team. Currently, the party was in Earn Town for an important mission. Kane asked Elena doubtfully if she was mistaken, as there was no way he could work with S-rank adventurers. He suggested the invitation was probably meant for someone else with the same name. Elena admitted that she had thought so at first, too. Not wanting to cause any more embarrassment, she apologized for drawing unnecessary attention to Kane. By the way, Kane asked for a quest as usual. Elena gave him a request from the church to gather ingredients for potions, with a reward of 1 silver coin, exactly the kind of job he usually took because few others wanted it. Meanwhile, in the consultation room, Elena bowed and apologized to Princess Anastoria for failing to persuade Cain. It seemed the girl Cain had met in the forest the day before was none other than the S-rank party's swift-sword princess who had sought him out for help. Sephiria, also known as the Pure Saintess, interjected to ask if Cain had a specific reason for declining the invitation. The almighty sorceress, Maya, true to her title, advised them to just give up, then playfully hugged Anastoria, teasing her for being so concerned about Cain. Loki suggested that Anastoria should approach Cain herself again, and she was about to do just that, until her gaze fell upon Elena's charms. Elena spoke up, explaining that Cain always accepted requests from the church, despite the very low rewards. The church couldn't pay more due to financial difficulties, which also affected the orphanage they supported. The church was only able to stay open thanks to the potions they made, but if it weren't for Cain's dedicated herb gathering, both the church and the orphanage would have had to close down long ago. Hearing this, Sephiria couldn't hold back her tears, while Anastoria listened to Elena in disbelief, thinking that Cain could have easily demanded more for selling such valuable items. She even accused Elena of using Cain for her own purposes, not hesitating to use her charms, just as an older woman would. Although Elena was so furious she wanted to retort immediately, she held back, thinking that the princess was just a spoiled, arrogant brat. To avoid trouble, she kept her mouth shut and didn't reply. At this point, Maya cut in, suggesting the princess should just ask her family for financial support to solve the problem once and for all. Anastoria lost her temper, insisting that money couldn't win Cain over. She explained that she'd gone to Cain's home and found him living in poverty. As the one who had willingly given him the fruit of revival, Anastoria knew Cain would never accept her money. Sephiria joined the argument, emotionally stating that she was only alive today thanks to Cain. She and Anastoria vowed to repay his kindness. Maya lost her patience, pushed them both aside, and reminded them that the group's original purpose was to have tea with beautiful women. For that reason, Maya was against the idea of letting a man join their team. Despite Maya's protests, Anastoria paid her no mind, insisting that she already had a plan. Meanwhile, on Wild Wolf Mountain, Cain was picking wild garlic. After gathering enough, he intended to stop by a small shrine, but couldn't offer the garlic because its smell was too strong. On his way, Cain unexpectedly ran into a group of goblins. As expected, he decided to take another route since he couldn't possibly fight so many of them. Cain mumbled to himself, wondering if it was just a coincidence that goblins were appearing so frequently near the village, and considered gathering a group to exterminate them. Cain suddenly came face to face with a vicious dragon, feeling so terrified he could barely keep his composure. Meanwhile, Anastoria cheerfully revealed that this was her plan to help Cain get promoted. Maya regretted not stopping the princess when she lured the dragon to the mountain. She pointed out that with his current armor and weapon, Cain had absolutely no chance against the monster. However, Sephiria had faith in Cain's abilities, and Anastoria agreed, claiming he could still win without even attacking the dragon. Maya could only scratch her head, finding it hard to believe the princess saw the ferocious dragon as nothing more than a tiny lizard. Meanwhile, Cain was running for his life as the dragon chased him, along with the goblins who got caught up in the chase and were running even faster than he was. In his panic, Cain happened to see a mithril sword that Anastoria had placed there for him. He picked it up, preparing to fight, but the urge to retreat was stronger than his will to fight. Anastoria was stunned by the sight before her, but Maya had seen this coming. The dragon continued to chase Cain until he tripped and fell, narrowly avoiding being decapitated. Cain kept running until he realized he had unintentionally led the dragon toward the village at the foot of the mountain. Just then, he heard a mysterious voice ring out, telling him to protect the village. Gripping the sword tightly, Cain stood up as the three girls watched him with different expressions. Painful memories suddenly flooded back as Cain charged forward to attack, but his sword was knocked from his hand. The dragon roared, sending him flying to the ground. Just as it lunged, while the girls watched in horror from a distance, Cain glanced over and saw the sword glowing as it hovered in midair. In the blink of an eye, the sound of splattering blood echoed as the sword plunged straight into the dragon's head. Cain still wondered if the dragon was truly dead until it roared one more time, and finally collapsed completely. He looked down at his trembling legs, still in disbelief at what had just happened. Maya believed it was a miracle that Cain managed to hit the dragon's weak spot, insisting it was just a random stroke of luck. In contrast, Anastoria claimed Cain had intentionally failed to turn the tables in his favor, and that he was an extraordinary swordsman the world had yet to recognize. Maya thought Cytherea would take her side, but Cytherea whispered that Cain had been blessed with divine protection. After Cain's victory, Anastoria asked Maya if she would now agree to let him join their team. To fully convince Maya, the princess emphasized that with the mithril sword, Cain's combat skills would improve, and the reward from slaying the dragon would help him upgrade his gear. Excited, Anastoria declared that one day Cain would become a swordsman as renowned as she was. Just then, he heard the voice of a witch, causing the girls to flee the scene, leaving Cain to wonder if he was just imagining things. At that moment, Cain recalled the mysterious voice he had heard while fighting the dragon. Back then, he had felt something strange, as if someone had granted him a new power. Cain believed it must have been a gift from the goddess. He thought about thanking the goddess properly, but he didn't know what to do with the dead dragon's body. The next day, Elena was yawning constantly while giving out quests to adventurers. Cain walked in and noticed she looked tired. When he asked if it was because of the dragon appraisal, she said no, as another department was in charge of that. Elena shared that she'd had to work overtime to finish all the front desk tasks. Mentioning the previous night's events, Elena said that Anastoria had thrown a huge fit when she learned Cain wouldn't be promoted, despite having defeated a dragon. Anastoria demanded to see the guildmaster to sort it out, but Elena pointed out that Cain had only reported finding a dragon's corpse on the mountain. Anastoria immediately objected, insisting that she had witnessed the entire thing with her own eyes and was not making it up. When the princess demanded that Elena do something to get Cain promoted, Elena apologized and asked the princess, what if that half-dead dragon had actually killed Cain? She further explained that during the appraisal, they discovered the dragon's internal organs were already severely damaged. Hearing this, Cytherea suddenly grew worried, while Maya remained unfazed, even suggesting the dragon was lucky it hadn't been killed by Anastoria herself. Elena also mentioned the mithril sword she had planted, and the princess admitted she had set it up, but not entirely. She also emphasized that Cain's swordsmanship was excellent. Elena reminded her that the guild always adheres to its ranking system to reflect the true strength of its adventurers. Seeing Anastoria's anger, Elena reminded her that during the team's recent S-rank mission, Cytherea's life had been in grave danger. She added that despite being a skilled swordswoman, Anastoria had been unable to protect her comrade. And if Cain were dragged into a high-ranking mission, his own life would be in danger. And so, Elena pleaded with Anastoria to let her protect the guild's adventurers under her own guidance. Back in the present, Cain snapped Elena out of her thoughts. She quickly apologized and presented him with the reward for discovering the dragon's carcass, 6,000 gold coins, which had been exchanged for 6 platinum coins. Seeing Cain remain so calm upon receiving the reward, Elena couldn't help but be surprised. Cain explained that he was actually a bit overwhelmed seeing such a large sum of money, created through high-level alchemy. It was the first time he'd ever seen this type of currency, as he was used to receiving just a single silver coin after 3 days of work. A moment later, Elena mentioned that they had found the owner of the mithril sword, but the owner, or rather, Anastoria, had sent word that Cain could keep it since she had already bought a new one. As Elena covered for the princess's flimsy excuses, she didn't realize that it struck Cain as odd. Walking past the church, Cain still couldn't believe the 6 platinum coins and the mithril sword he had just received. Deciding to visit the orphanage, he heard Sister Sylvia, an elven nun from the Ern Town parish, desperately begging a group of men for one more week to pay the church's debt. Kurz, a large, burly man in the group, took out a potion they were selling and smashed it right in front of her. Kurt suggested that Sylvia could pay off the debt in other ways. He grabbed her by the arm, lifting her chin and saying that as a high elf, she could earn 200 gold coins in a single night. Sylvia shoved his hand away, reminding him she was a nun. Kurtz's gaze then shifted to the peeking orphans, musing that the children would surely be willing to step up to protect the church in her place. Before the situation could escalate, Kane stepped in. He was immediately recognized by the man known as Snakehead, a member of the infamous Two-Headed Viper clan. There were plenty of bad rumors about their activities, and Kane wondered what they wanted with Sylvia. A single cold glare from Snakehead was enough to send a chill down his spine. The long-haired goon Jinx advised Kane to stick to his herb gathering and stay out of this. Hares, another man in the group, recognized Kane as the grass picker who'd found the dragon's carcass on the mountain. He demanded Kane pay the church's 200 gold coin debt, knowing full well the actual amount was much more. Kane asked for the total sum, and Snakehead revealed the church owed them a full 6,000 gold coins. Jinx scoffed, not believing for a second that Kane could afford to pay. But Kane produced the 6 platinum coins, enough to cover the entire debt. Though clearly unhappy about it, Hares was forced to produce the contract at his boss's command. Snakehead stressed that his clan were legitimate lenders. He then assured them they wouldn't cause any trouble as long as debts were paid on time. He apologized to Sylvia for the disturbance and told her to stop by if she ever needed financial assistance again. As they left, Kane suddenly collapsed to the ground, prompting a worried Sylvia to rush to his side. She apologized and promised she would find a way to repay him. But Kane told her not to worry, saying that he owed her for raising him at this very orphanage, as they talked about why the church had accumulated such a large debt. Sylvia explained that some of the clan's members had tried to take a cut of the income from the orphans who sold souvenirs in the town square. They claimed it was for an unpaid tax from 100 years ago, treating it as some kind of rental fee. Kane was outraged, not understanding why they should be held responsible for something like that. He remarked that the clan was probably in collusion with the local authorities, fabricating excuses about tax evasion. Sylvia apologized to him again, explaining that this was also why he had always received such low rewards for his work. Hearing this, Kane became convinced that the clan wasn't just after money, but was targeting Sylvia specifically. She shared that she had some good news, but just then, the children swarmed around Kane, interrupting their conversation. Kane reassured the children, who were still frightened from the earlier incident, and thanked Kid, the oldest among them, for looking after the younger ones. After chatting and reminiscing for a while, Kane treated them all to some snacks. Watching from the gate, Maya and Sephiria couldn't help but admire his sincere kindness, while Anastasia was slightly annoyed that Kane should have used the money to upgrade his equipment. In the end, they decided to take action to deal with Snakehead's gang. Elsewhere, the goons discussed how Kane had ruined their plan. Even so, they were still keeping an eye on the children, confident that Sylvia would have to come to them for help sooner or later. One of Snakehead's henchmen suggested they get rid of Kane before he could ruin their plans again. However, Snakehead shook his head, warning that killing another adventurer was a serious crime. This surprised the others, as they hadn't expected such a sentiment from him. A moment later, Snakehead informed his crew that there had been numerous reports of monster sightings on Mount Wolfferry, leading to many adventurers losing their lives. He spoke with a menacing look, secretly hatching a plan to eliminate his problem while protecting his own reputation. Maya asked Anastasia if they should act now, but she replied that for the time being, they would just observe their movements. The princess suddenly realized that once Kane surpassed the C-rank adventurers, he would definitely be promoted. Maya warned that Elena would just nag them again if they kept interfering, but Anastasia paid it no mind, vowing she would make everyone recognize Kane's true potential. Maya then noticed that Sephiria was nowhere to be seen. At the orphanage behind the church, The children were happily eating the fresh fruit Cain had brought them. To show her gratitude, Sylvia gave him an antidote potion and a healing potion, the most expensive items the church sold. Cain refused, but Sylvia revealed that she had been planning to give him these two potions for a long time, even before the incident with the clan. He finally accepted, then signaled to the children to give him something else. A few moments later, Cain received a flower crown, some toys, letters, and various other things. Faced with the children's sincere gesture, he was moved and thanked them. After putting all the gifts into his treasure box, Cain asked Sylvia about the good news she had mentioned. Sylvia excitedly told him about the Pure Saints inspection taking place throughout the town of Ern. Apparently, she's famous for her benevolence and the help she provides to churches in the places she visits. Hearing this, Cain felt the title sounded familiar, as if he'd heard it somewhere before. Just then, Sapphira entered and approached Cain. He noticed her face was slightly flushed, and the distance between them grew smaller and smaller. Suddenly, Sapphira declared that Cain was her destiny, vowing to dedicate her entire life to him. Flustered and unable to think clearly under the pressure of Sapphira's proximity, Cain hesitantly asked her age. When he heard she was only 13, Cain snapped back to his senses. Surrounded by innocent children, Cain told Sapphira that with such a large age gap, it would be difficult for any kind of relationship to develop. Struggling to find the right words, Cain asked Sylvia for help. Sylvia quickly realized Sapphira's true identity and respectfully bowed to the pure saint. Upon learning Sapphira's identity, Cain quickly apologized, not daring to look her in the eye as he knelt. With teary eyes, Sapphira told them they didn't need to bow. Sylvia whispered to Cain, revealing that Sapphira was the daughter of the head priest at the Adia Regius Church, and mentioned that the saint's inspection could make their conversation uncomfortable. Just as they began to talk, Anastasia burst into the room, confronted Sapphira, and declared that she had dedicated her heart to Cain. Tired of their thoughtless behavior, Maya angrily used magic to fling them both into the air. Cain immediately called out to Maya, asking about their real relationship. Maya confirmed that she and Sapphira were just friends and apologized for causing a disturbance. Still cheerful with Cain, Maya informed Sylvia that Sapphira had already told her father about the church's situation, so she no longer needed to worry. Before causing any more commotion, Maya pulled the group outside and said her goodbyes. As they left, Cain wondered if he had ever met Anastasia before. Later, at the most luxurious inn in town, Sapphira announced she would perform the saint's vow for Cain. Before Anastasia could misunderstand her, Maya explained that the ritual was similar to a blessing, where a priestess bestows divine power upon her chosen hero, strengthening them. However, the ritual could only be performed once. As if a switch had been flipped, Maya pinned Sapphira to the bed, demanding she bestow the power on Anastasia, instead of Cain, to increase their chances of defeating the enemy. Sapphira replied that mere strength couldn't defeat evil, but a pure heart could make a difference. For that very reason, she had chosen Cain over her friend. While Maya fumed, Anastasia interrupted and agreed with Sapphira's decision, stressing that Cain was a promising swordsman and even stronger than her. With a serious expression, the princess asserted that without Sapphira's faith, they wouldn't have come this far. Maya, still skeptical of Cain's ability to protect an entire kingdom, retorted that he could barely protect himself. Anastasia reminded Maya of what Elena once said about Cain, a man who always lays his sword down, the sign of a burgeoning talent in swordsmanship. Though puzzled by those words, Maya decided to postpone the saint's vow and declared that from now on they couldn't see Cain without her permission, which made Sapphira pout. As the argument continued, Maya was clearly exhausted. For a moment, she imagined Cain joining their party and even planned to make him their special helper. But Anastasia quickly pulled her back to reality, reminding her that tomorrow was a big event. The next morning, on Wild Wolf Mountain, Cain visited the shrine and spoke with the goddess, sharing about the gifts the children gave him and how the weather had improved since the evil dragon was slain. As always, he prayed for the goddess's protection. By chance, he discovered a suit of armor next to the shrine, along with a letter addressed to the weak hero. Instead of just taking it, Cain decided to put the armor on. Just seconds later, an arrow flew straight at him. Snakehead's subordinates appeared, eager to eliminate Cain. While he was trying to understand what was happening, Jinx attacked, injuring his leg. They repeatedly targeted the unprotected parts of his body, making Cain realize their true goal was to kill him. In the middle of the fight, Cain reminded them that their actions were illegal. Jinx scoffed, saying that if he died, the monsters in the forest would be the ones to blame. To buy himself time to escape, Cain kicked some dirt into his opponent's eyes and fled. In a rage, Jinx swore he would kill Cain and sell every last child from the orphanage until none were left. Cain believed that with his familiarity with the forest, he could easily escape them. But unfortunately, he began to feel dizzy and collapsed while Jinx boasted about why they were called the Two-Headed Viper Clan. It turned out the axe Jinx had used to slash him earlier was coated in a special poison. As his body grew numb from the poison, images of Sylvia and the children flashed through Cain's mind, and then a mysterious voice woke him. A moment later, Jinx noticed the blades of grass rustling and hastily swung his axe at them, but only found empty space. Immediately, a sword pierced straight through his chest, wiping the triumphant look off his face. Cain reminded Jinx that the church's potion had saved many lives. Just then, Kurtz appeared, scornfully saying that Jinx was nothing more than a D-rank adventurer. Kurtz warned Cain that they weren't in the same league, then declared that Cain would soon be meeting his maker. In an instant, the battle between a C-rank and a D-rank adventurer began. Kurtz quickly gained the upper hand, mocking Cain for his weak attacks. Arrogantly, Kurtz launched a powerful strike, but Cain managed to block it. Kurtz mentioned how Jinx had recently been promoted to C-rank, while Cain had been stuck in the same place for years. Cain gritted his teeth, stressing that Kurtz didn't deserve to be called an adventurer. Even though he knew his mithril sword was stronger than Kurtz's weapon, Cain still lacked the physical strength to overpower him. Suddenly, Kurtz kicked Cain, knocking him off balance. He confessed to having killed both people and monsters, then launched another slash. Faced with a seasoned killer, Cain realized he was in real danger. In a fit of rage, Kurtz condemned Cain for daring to call himself an adventurer just for gathering herbs and clinging to some delusional belief in justice. Cain slammed hard into a tree trunk, leaving him open for Kurtz to deliver the final blow. But in that very moment, Cain somehow managed to block Kurtz's attack. It was then that Kurtz confessed he was the one who put the church on his boss's radar, confidently declaring a premature victory. He threatened that Cain would never see Sylvia and the children again. To counterattack, Cain kicked him in the stomach and threw something at Kurtz. He slashed at it, but was immediately enveloped in a strange cloud of garlic smoke, causing him to stumble around in confusion until he bumped into a tree, shaking loose some pine cones. Taking advantage of the situation, Cain charged in for the attack, thinking he had finished the fight. But Kurtz refused to be defeated and raised his sword once more. However, as if the pine cones had become Cain's allies, their falling seeds struck Kurtz, causing him to drop his sword. Panting, Cain knew that it was only thanks to the mithril sword that he'd survived the battle. Otherwise, he would have rejoined his fallen comrades. After the incident, Cain decided to postpone gathering herbs until tomorrow, not knowing what that clan would do next. When Cain rushed to the guild to report the incident, Anastasia jumped for joy, pleased that Cain had made it through the intense battle unharmed. Sephiria then asked about the pine cones, and Maya explained that they were from the tree the children often used for play or decorations. Anastasia curiously asked Maya if she had used magic to make them fall, but Maya denied it. This made the princess even more impressed with Cain, believing he had planned it all along. Out of curiosity, Anastasia tried punching the tree trunk, but nothing fell, leaving Maya confused. Looking over at Sephiria, Maya saw she was in tears again, believing there was divine intervention every time Cain was in danger. Maya just laughed and waved it off, reminding everyone that they still had work to do. At the guild, Elena comforted Cain, assuring him that he wouldn't get in trouble since the Viper clan had started it. She reassured him that the guild would trust his detailed account and that the higher-ups would look into it thoroughly. Even so, Kane still felt uneasy. Elena expressed her relief at seeing him return to the guild safely. Kane's face flushed as he looked down and thanked Elena for her concern. Meanwhile, the guild staff was conducting a thorough investigation into the matter. Kane worried that Snakehead might get out of this with his cunning, perhaps arguing it was just an isolated incident caused by a troublesome subordinate. Meanwhile, at the clan's headquarters, Snakehead ordered his subordinates to lie low for a while until things cooled down. 2 of them protested, fearing that other organizations would look down on the Viper clan if they stayed quiet. Just as the argument was heating up, uninvited guests appeared. The clan members tried to restrain the girls, only to be taken down by Anastoria in a single blow. Witnessing her strength, Snakehead began to suspect she was a magically enhanced swordswoman. But he quickly realized she was a truly formidable opponent. Not wanting to waste time on banter, Anastoria directly asked why he was still targeting Kane. After some beating around the bush, Snakehead finally admitted that he couldn't overlook what Kane had done to his men. With a murderous glare, Snakehead charged at Anastoria, swinging 2 swords and claiming she couldn't possibly dodge the attack. Anastoria drew her sword and snapped both of Snakehead's blades in half, leaving him stunned. His jaw dropped as he realized she was holding a divine sword, the crimson blade bearing the royal crest, known as Durandana, one of only 3 divine swords in the world. This was when the chaotic trio proudly introduced themselves as the Blooming Rosen Maidens. Knowing his clan stood no chance against an S-rank party, Snakehead tried to remain calm, apologizing for attacking Anastoria and quickly switching to a legal counterattack. He claimed that her party's barging into his headquarters was illegal, while he was merely collecting on unpaid church taxes. Furthermore, he demanded compensation for the damages caused by their unannounced visit. He was hoping to catch Anastoria off guard, but she calmly presented a document proving she was authorized to conduct an independent investigation, making his situation even more difficult. Maya delivered another blow, declaring she had the authority to arrest Snakehead at any time. He broke out in a cold sweat as Maya stated that she had the authority to detain, pass judgment, and even carry out an immediate execution if necessary. As a high-ranking officer, Maya officially placed the double-headed Viper clan under arrest for their crimes. Refusing to accept her verdict, Snakehead tried to resist, forcing Maya to order his immediate execution. He pulled a hidden dagger from his back and lunged at Zephyria, but luckily, Anastoria reacted quickly, stopping him before anything terrible could happen. The next morning, at Kane's house, he was exhausted from a sleepless night. Even cuddling his 3 cats didn't seem to help him get any rest. A moment later, Sylvia burst into the room, hurriedly embracing Kane and scolding him for facing the Viper clan alone. Leaving him clueless as to what was going on, Sylvia checked him all over for injuries, then pulled him into her arms again, telling him to stop getting involved in dangerous situations, and he shyly apologized for making her worry. Model. Sylvia recalled Kane's childhood, when the boy didn't even dare to go to the bathroom alone, and often said he would marry her when he grew up. She could hardly believe that same child had now become strong enough to take down Snakehead and his cronies all by himself. Kane cried out in disbelief at what he had just accomplished, partly because that troublesome trio had interfered. The next morning, Kane visited his old friend, Bacchus, to talk about his troubles. He told Bacchus that his former landlady, who had been one of the Viper clan's victims, had decided to move away and live with her daughter in the capital after the clan was destroyed. The inn where he used to stay had closed early that morning, and to make matters worse, an increase in monsters in the area meant all the inns were fully booked with an influx of adventurers. Bacchus jokingly asked if Kane had become a government agent after the Viper clan fell. Kane quickly denied it, explaining that he wasn't the one behind it and that the guild had issued a statement to clear his name. Bacchus laughed saying Kane must be flooded with invitations to join other groups, but Kane insisted he would only be a hindrance to any team. His biggest concern right now was finding a place to stay for the night. Just then, Cytherea walked into the tavern. Kane was surprised, wondering why she was here. Cytherea said she had something to discuss with him. While they enjoyed the food Kane offered, she returned the platinum coins he had used to protect the church. Kane felt a bit flustered, recalling the moment he trembled before Snakehead. When he realized that Cytherea had witnessed the whole thing and that it was the girls who were behind the destruction of the Viper clan, Kane took her hand and said that, since he wasn't sure if this was his original money, he would donate it all to the church. Cytherea was amazed that Kane was willing to donate the money to the church, even when he himself still had no place to stay. Suddenly, she placed his hand on her forehead and, filled with admiration for his noble qualities, declared that Kane was worthy of receiving the saintess's vow. But before she could complete the ritual, Maya and Anastasia entered the tavern. The princess pulled Cytherea away from Kane, creating a dramatic scene as she scolded Cytherea for meeting with Kane without permission. As Kane noticed Anastasia looking at him shyly, she thanked him once again. Finally, Kane was certain that she was one of the girls he had met at the orphanage. Bacchus then teased Maya, saying Kane was so popular he had stolen her friend. Right then, Kane directly asked Anastasia about the symbol they had left at the Viper clan's headquarters. Unable to avoid it, she admitted she did it so people would stop looking down on him. Kane gently reminded her that even if people treated him like royalty, it meant nothing to him. But if that was her way of showing gratitude, he appreciated her efforts. Anastasia was just as flustered standing before Kane, while Cytherea practically collapsed from embarrassment. Maya, in her role as the protective friend, warned Kane not to get any closer to them. Before leaving, Maya told Kane to forget everything Cytherea had just said. Kane turned and asked Bacchus why he had stayed silent while Maya was upset. And Bacchus admitted he didn't know what to do. To make up for it, he advised Kane to stop by the guild to find a solution. That evening, Kane went to the guild, where Elena asked if he had tried registering for the lodging service for adventurers. Kane nodded but said he'd had no luck. Determined to help, Elena revealed a secret about an empty room in the guild staff's dormitory. But when Kane checked, the room was already occupied. To make up for it, Elena offered to let Kane stay in her room temporarily. Being a proper gentleman, Kane refused, saying he would sleep at the church. Elena reminded him that adult men were forbidden from staying in a place run by priestesses. When Kane considered sleeping in the hallway, she told him that would only worry her more. Kane wondered why Elena wasn't uncomfortable with the two of them sleeping in the same room. In the end, he reluctantly accepted. Kane tried to enjoy the cup of milky tea Elena had prepared, but she noticed his hand was shaking. Kane explained that his hands often trembled whenever his mind wandered. And even though he told himself to be strong, this time he couldn't shake the haunting feeling from the battle. Hearing this, Elena began to sweat as her own mind wandered, and she placed her hand on the back of his. She reassured him not to worry, because this was her first time comforting someone like this too. After blurting that out, Elena suddenly became aware of her actions and worried that her underwear didn't match. While she was flustered, Kane confessed that even though adventurers often fight people, he still wasn't used to having to kill. He could still feel the sensation of that moment. Kane thought Elena would probably see him as a coward, but instead, she felt ashamed for misunderstanding his intentions. After a moment of embarrassment, Elena told Kane he wasn't a coward. With her own hand still trembling, she said that it only showed he was a kind person. Right after that, Elena pulled him to the bed, gently pushed his body down, and repeated that she was so happy he was safe. She expressed her hope that he would always return to the guild safely, far from any danger. Elena added that if one day Kane stopped showing up at the guild, she would never forgive him. She pulled him close, telling him to relax and get a good night's sleep. In contrast to their peaceful night, Maya's eardrums felt like they were about to burst as Anastasia and Cytherea talked nonstop about Kane. Finally, Maya lost her patience and demanded they both be quiet. The two girls, still infatuated with Kane, held hands, and asked Maya to calm down. Returning to a serious tone, Maya reminded Anastoria of the real reason they came to the town of Ern. Anastoria replied that their ultimate goal was to prevent the revival of the evil god, who was sealed on Mount Sit. Furthermore, they also had to take action to deal with the inevitable appearance of more monsters in the region. To complete their mission, Maya stressed that Anastoria, the strongest hero alive in this era, was the one who deserved to receive the saintess's vow. However, Cytherea insisted that what would defeat the evil god wasn't heroism, but kindness. From her perspective, empowering Cain wasn't something she was completely happy about. Anastoria understood Cytherea's point, but she was uncomfortable with the ritual where a man and a woman had to embrace. The princess asked Cytherea to reconsider, just for that reason. As the debate grew heated, Maya asked Cytherea why it absolutely had to be Cain, and what she meant by the kindness she mentioned. Maya said she didn't want to see Cytherea sacrifice herself, but if her determination to help Cain was the key to victory, she wouldn't stand in the way any longer. Cytherea simply replied that it was a divine intuition, which made Maya firmly decide not to accept it. The story then shifts to Anastoria's other motives. She was still determined to recruit Cain into her group, planning to make him stronger to convince Maya that he was worthy of joining. Cytherea agreed and volunteered to help Cain train. No longer in the mood to argue, Maya approved their plan to use the upcoming monster outbreak to push Cain to S rank. Meanwhile, Elena's peaceful night was interrupted by loud snoring, keeping her from sleeping. At Wild Wolf Mountain, Cain expressed his gratitude to the mountain goddess for watching over him. It seemed the reward for the herb gathering quest had returned to its original 3 silver coins, and Cain couldn't be happier that the church had overcome its financial difficulties. However, what worried him was the increasing number of monsters appearing in the area. Suddenly, he heard a cry for help and immediately ran toward it, finding 3 goblins standing at the edge of a cliff. As he wondered if he could handle this small group of monsters, the cry for help rang out again. When the goblins noticed Cain's presence, they charged at him. But he easily defeated them with his mithril sword. He then ran to the cliff's edge and found York, a woodcutter from the mountain village, trapped. When the old man asked about the goblins, Cain told him he had taken care of them. Looking at York's condition, Cain realized he had been injured during a monster encounter. York was a bit embarrassed and asked if Cain could help him get back to the village. Cain didn't mind, but suggested they treat the wound before leaving. Cain pulled out a recovery potion worth 10 silver coins, but York refused it, finding it too expensive. This reminded Cain of when Sylvia had insisted on helping him. After applying the potion to the wound, York winced from the stinging pain, but the injury began to heal. Then Cain carried the old man down the mountain on his back. Along the way, York remarked that Cain was very different from the other adventurers he had met. York spoke of his recent monster encounters in the forest, revealing that the goblins had set up a lair somewhere on the mountain. The old man had once peeked into their nest and discovered there was even a goblin lord, a B-rank monster and the leader of the low-level goblins. Despite the lurking danger, York was determined to stay in the forest. As he had a family to feed, he shared that their village chief had visited the Adventurers Guild and posted a monster subjugation request. Adventurers were now stationed in the village, but York worried if their forces would be enough to handle such a dangerous enemy. The village's financial burden was also growing due to the cost of this request. Cain wondered if he could join the monster subjugation team. As soon as he arrived, he tended to the injured and brewed herbal tea for them. Looking at the herbs he had brought, Cain felt relieved that he still had enough. His attention was drawn to Keisha, York's granddaughter, when the little girl said she was hungry. York could only apologize for coming home empty-handed and injured. As expected, Cain quickly found a solution. He took out the little bread he had left and asked Kesha to help distribute it to the other children. As the little girl ran outside happily, a bright smile on her face, York asked Cain about his dream house plan. York assured him that he and the village carpenters would be willing to help. Hearing the conversation, other villagers also volunteered to help build Kane's house. That afternoon, Kane took a walk around the village and came across a crowd gathered around the adventurers participating in the monster subjugation quest. Kane squeezed through the crowd and expressed his desire to join, even though he hadn't registered through the guild. Unexpectedly, he was warmly welcomed, with people even calling him a one-man army. While Kane tried to correct the misunderstanding, a young man looked at him with disdain. In contrast, Randall, the leader of the C-rank adventurer party Bear Killers, greeted him enthusiastically. Randall thanked Kane for joining them, and after a few friendly words, the team got down to the business of locating the goblin lair. Since Kane was very familiar with the mountain area, Randall asked for his opinion. Just as Kane was about to speak, the young adventurer from before sneered at him, calling him a herb picker. That was Abel, the leader of the A-rank party Comet Chasers. Abel declared that Kane, being a mere D rank, would only slow the team down. Casaro, one of Abel's party members, advised Kane to ignore their leader, saying he was just angry because Kane was getting so much attention. Another member, Cruz, revealed that Abel had been tracking the two-headed Viper clan for a long time and intended to wipe them out, but was repeatedly thwarted by Kane. Even though Kane denied it, Abel just assumed he was being humble. His anger caused Abel to smash a wine barrel and declare he would take down the Goblin Lord himself. He then stormed off angrily, which only prompted Kasara to tease him further. Kane, overwhelmed by their youthful energy and mood swings, turned his focus back to the mission with Randall. Meanwhile, in the heart of Wild Wolf Mountain, Anastoria couldn't stop thinking about Kane as she took down one monster after another. Encountering various monsters, she believed they were getting closer to the evil god Seal. The team was determined to boost Kane's development as quickly as possible, except for Maya, who thought they were being delusional. After a moment, Maya's detection spell discovered a cave teeming with monsters. Anastoria suggested they wipe out all the weak minions and leave the leader, but only injure it for Kane to finish off. To blow off some steam, Maya volunteered to handle the weaker monsters, but no one expected her to unleash her full power. She cast a destructive spell that made the ground tremble, while Kane, standing just a few steps away, was caught by surprise as he came across the group of girls. A vortex of fire called Flare Destroyer engulfed the entire cave, right where Kane had predicted the goblin's den would be. As Maya's flames turned the area into a sea of fire, Anastoria warned that they would soon be discovered if she continued using that much power. Fortunately, Maya managed to hold back before starting a forest fire. Still, Maya seemed satisfied, declaring that the sound of the explosion had relieved all her stress. The stunned looks on Anastoria's and Saphiria's faces said it all. With the cave ceiling scorched to ash, they wondered if any monsters could have survived, until Maya pointed to the heavily injured Goblin King. Seeing a Goblin King instead of a Goblin Lord, Anastoria concluded that there might be even more monsters, all because Maya had used too much power. The princess guessed the Goblin King might die before Kane could arrive, and felt a little guilty. Maya then asked Saphiria to heal the monster to keep it alive for Kane. Unsure if her healing spell would even work on a monster, but wanting to help Kane progress, Saphiria gave it a try. To her surprise, the healing spell seemed to have the opposite effect on the monster, leaving Saphiria in complete shock. She realized her magic had inadvertently pushed the Goblin King into a state reserved for sinners, going against the laws of the gods. Hearing footsteps approaching, the group quickly hid. When Kane arrived at the scene, he was confused, wondering if this was even a monster den at all. While looking around, he found the corpses of goblins. For a moment, he thought the explosion might have been their own doing, but then realized a goblin mage wasn't powerful enough to create such a massive blast. As he moved through the cave, Kane stumbled upon the bodies of two dead goblin lords, but suddenly, the living Goblin King charged straight at him. Just then, Abel showed up, blaming Kane for leaving the group behind. However, Abel's expression quickly changed when he witnessed Kane slice the Goblin King's body in two. Soon after, Randall arrived and also blamed Kane for getting ahead of the group. As the other adventurers started to gather, murmurs spread through the crowd. They were stunned, thinking Kane had single-handedly defeated the Goblin Lords and the much stronger Goblin King. When they learned there were also bodies of orcs and ogres nearby, they were even more astonished. Kane tried to correct them, saying it wasn't what they thought, but no one would listen. Meanwhile, Abel was silent, then suddenly gritted his teeth and strode over to Kane, apologizing for his previous disrespectful attitude. Abel bowed his head, acknowledging Kane's strength in defeating the Goblin King, something that even an A-rank adventurer like himself would struggle with. Kane, pleased, accepted the apology. Just when Kane thought they were starting to get along, Abel suddenly declared Kane his rival. Kane admitted that he dealt the finishing blow to the Goblin King, but denied being the one who caused the terrifying explosion. Cruz chimed in, insisting Kane was a mage who could cast spells without an incantation. Cruz recounted the legend of the sage Dana, when 300 monsters led by an ogre lord attacked the royal capital. Dana annihilated them with Flare Destroyer, also without needing a chant. When Cruz compared Kane's magical power to be nearly on par with Dana's, both Abel and Casaro were left speechless. Backed into a corner, Kane tried to explain that he knew almost nothing about magic, but this only surprised Cruz more, who assumed Kane hadn't studied magic, yet could still use high-level spells. Abel spoke up, praising Kane for being humble, and Casaro agreed, saying he was the complete opposite of Abel. To protect Kane, Randall intervened, telling everyone to believe his words. Randall then declared that all the quest funds and rewards should be given to Kane. After Randall spoke, a heavy silence fell over the crowd, so quiet you could hear every breath, as they realized Kane's importance to this mission. Then one person spoke up in agreement, and soon after, the other adventurers also voiced their support, making the decision to give the reward to Kane official. Seizing the opportunity, Randall asked Kane to treat them all to a good meal. The next day, Anastoria heard from the villagers that Kane had donated his quest reward to help the village. An old man mentioned that the donation was made anonymously, but he was certain it was Kane. Thanks to Kane's generosity, the money the village had spent on the monster subjugation quest was returned, leaving the villagers deeply grateful. Meanwhile, Safiri was playing with the children, listening to them talk about the sweets Kane had given them. To express his gratitude, York planned to repair the small mountain shrine. After gathering more information about Kane, the comical trio prepared for their next mission. Anastoria, intending to help Kane gain more public recognition, planned to have him face some ordinary monsters. Maya, the most practical member of the group, remarked that it was Kane's dedication to giving back to the community that was earning him respect. Ignoring Maya's comment, Anastoria prepared a new extermination request that would both help Kane prove himself further and aid the villagers. The princess suggested they target the monsters they had already planned to exterminate. Maya and Safiria both agreed that monster subjugation quests weren't Kane's specialty, unless it was an herb-gathering mission. Anastoria told them not to worry, because Elena, whom she sarcastically called that pink-haired old hag, would take care of persuading Kane to help them. A few days later, Elena advised Kane not to accept certain quests. In a short flashback, Anastoria had ordered Elena to only offer these specific quests to Kane, and if Elena dared to interfere, the princess promised there would be a fitting punishment. Although Elena initially refused the client's request, she was forced to accept it under duress from Anastoria. Back in the present, Kane was confused when Elena told him to reject 3 requests. With a worried expression, Elena explained that even she wouldn't accept these quests if she had the choice. Upon checking the details, Kane realized the requests involved hunting a goblin lord, an orc lord, and an ogre lord, missions far beyond the scope of a D-rank adventurer. Just then, Abel walked in and remarked that these requests don't typically show up at the D-rank reception counter. Moreover, the requests were all specifically designated for Kane, which further intrigued Abel, who was known for his free-spirited personality and had surprisingly hit it off with Cain. Elena saw it as a breath of fresh air. As Abel asked if his party, the Comet Chasers, could join Cain on the mission. Following Cain's resounding victory, Abel declared this a chance to compete with his rival and vowed to steal the spotlight. Cain quickly explained that he wasn't interested in monster-slaying quests and still had an unfinished herb-gathering mission. To help Cain finish his task quickly, Abel, along with Casaro and Cruz, volunteered to assist him, dragging him out of the guild hall. Eavesdropping nearby, the comical trio, especially Anastoria, were surprised that Cain had gained more comrades. Maya, standing by the reception counter, apologized to Elena for not being able to stop her foolish friends. Elena asked Maya to keep a tighter leash on them next time, but Anastoria cut in before they lost sight of Cain. She ordered everyone to get moving, but suddenly remembered something. When Cytherea asked where she was going, the princess replied that she just had a small errand to run. As she rushed out, Anastoria reminded everyone to stay close to Cain. On Wild Wolf Mountain, Cain was astonished to come across a massive shrine. Casaro was surprised, not knowing a shrine was even there, while Cain shared that he'd known about it from before, but it used to be much smaller. As they stepped inside, Cain speculated that the villagers had probably expanded the shrine to show their gratitude. He prayed to the mountain goddess for protection, and Casaro followed suit. Afterward, the group continued their journey. Despite only tagging along with Cain, Abel took the lead on the mission. He proposed they all gather at a wooden cabin in the middle of the forest and declared that the winner would be decided by the number of low-level monsters they defeated. He urged everyone to follow the steep path and take down any monsters along the way. Abel's group eagerly pushed forward, leaving Cain behind before he could say a word. With an incredulous expression, Maya watched as Anastoria defeated a whole bunch of low-level monsters, piling their corpses in an area rich with herbs. The princess was confident Cain would surely pass that way. Maya expressed her disapproval of Anastoria's unorthodox training methods, but the princess insisted that, one way or another, this would still benefit Cain. Cytherea commented that reducing the number of monsters was still a smart move. Maya, not objecting to either of their opinions, led Anastoria to believe she was starting to change her attitude about Cain. Coincidentally, they heard Cain's footsteps and quickly hid, while Cytherea quietly slipped away in another direction. When Cain arrived at the scene, he looked utterly bewildered. Suddenly, an ogre lord appeared to spring back to life. But it quickly collapsed, unable to withstand its fatal wounds. An orc lord stirred in agony, and Cain quickly finished it off to end its suffering. From a distance, Anastoria watched on, like a mother proud of her child. As for Maya, though still skeptical of Cain's abilities, she began to realize that the princess's bizarre methods had helped him build courage and a steady resolve. Maya was gradually starting to see Cain's potential, but she couldn't fully accept it yet. Looking at Anastoria, she wondered what was going on inside the princess's head. And then Maya thought to herself that Cain and Anastoria probably shared a single brain cell. Speaking of the princess's favorite subject, Cain was the first to arrive at the wooden cabin. Having faced so many monsters, Cain had only managed to gather a few herbs. Still on edge, he flinched at the sound of rustling in the tall grass. But it turned out to be just Abel, who had only managed to take down 3 low-level monsters of each type. Not long after, the girls appeared, revealing they had also only encountered low-level monsters. His competitive spirit ignited. Abel urged everyone to head back into the forest to slay more ferocious beasts. Unbeknownst to them, Anastoria had secretly cleared out all the low-level monsters along Abel's path. As Abel asked Cain about the results of their contest, an ogre king suddenly appeared, causing Casera to recoil in fear. Cain quickly told Abel to protect his teammates, while he decided to draw the monster's attention by launching his sword towards it. To everyone's surprise, the ogre king collapsed instantly. Cain was stunned, wondering if the wind had somehow guided his sword. Abel checked on Casara, and she reassured him she was fine since she was an A rank. Kisara also thanked Cain for saving them. Abel curiously asked Cain how he was able to control the sword as if he were commanding it, remarking that with a technique like that, the Ogre King clearly didn't stand a chance. Cain just mumbled that perhaps it was thanks to one of the monsters he dealt with earlier, leaving Abel bewildered and exclaiming, "Just what are you?" Abel couldn't believe Cain had just taken down an Ogre King and was completely unscathed. Even though that monster wasn't part of their current competition, Abel felt utterly defeated. Just then, the entire group's eyes widened in astonishment as they noticed the corpses of low-level monsters scattered all along Cain's path. Without another word, Abel raised the white flag in surrender. Even so, the comet chasers remained determined to become stronger. For a moment, Cain considered telling them the truth, but knowing they wouldn't believe him, he held his tongue. As the group helped Cain gather more herbs, Maya sternly reprimanded Anastoria for placing an Ogre King in her training area. The appearance of a king-class monster made Maya feel that something was amiss, and she told the other girls they needed to return to the inn for an emergency meeting. But then they realized Safiria was missing, causing the group to hastily split up to search for her. Cain told the younger members to go on ahead, saying he was going to stop by the shrine. When he arrived, he discovered someone was inside, and it was none other than Safiria. She declared that the time had come for destiny to make its call, and quickly brought Cain back to the town of Ern, where they promptly regrouped with the comet chasers. Upon arriving at the church, Safiria opened the door and called for Sylvia. And without hesitation, she borrowed the most private room and instructed Sylvia to ensure no one was allowed to enter while they performed the vow ceremony. Abel and the other members had also followed Cain there, but Sylvia stopped them, not allowing them to go any further. Inside the room, Cain recalled that, as a child, he and Altena were always scolded for playing here. Safiria expressed her gratitude to Cain for giving the revival elixir to Anastoria. Cain humbly gave the credit to the princess, who had personally gathered the necessary ingredients to create the revival medicine. Safiria expressed her admiration for Cain's natural kindness, always thinking of others despite the many hardships he faced himself. From helping the church to supporting villages, his compassion had left a profound impact on the lives of those he met. With that said, Safiria began to undress, causing Cain to turn away in embarrassment. She explained that she could only bestow her divine power upon a single person in her lifetime. And this time, she wanted Cain to accept her vow. Safiria then asked him to take off his shirt, stunning Cain. Unwilling to undress without knowing why, Cain demanded an explanation. Safiria explained that for the ritual to succeed, they needed to synchronize their heartbeats as much as possible. She reassured him that as soon as the ritual was complete, he could put his clothes back on. So they sat down on the floor, with Safiria's body pressed against his back, her hands placed on Cain's chest. Safiria asked him to focus and regulate his heartbeat. Despite his efforts, Cain's heart continued to pound uncontrollably. Safiria urged Cain to match his breathing to her rhythm. Then, she attempted to enter his mind. In the middle of the ritual, Cain suddenly remembered the mysterious voice he had heard in the forest, and finally realized who was behind it. In a memory from 20 years ago, Cain remembered his younger self asking his former companion, Altena, why she protected him from monsters, despite suffering such serious wounds herself. Altena smiled, reassuring him that everything was fine. It was in that moment Cain understood that Altena wouldn't make it, as she had lost too much blood. Gathering her last bit of strength, Altena told Cain not to blame himself. Before drawing her last breath, she whispered softly that she would always be with him. Cain recalled that they had grown up together in an orphanage, and he had always seen Altena as an older sister. She was the reason he became an adventurer. After Altena's death, Cain desperately sought a way to revive her, but was unsuccessful. Because of that, he never got the chance to confess his feelings. Sometime later, Cain discovered a letter that Altena had left behind, in which she urged him to become an adventurer who would always be ready to save people at any cost. After weeks of being lost, Altena's letter spurred Cain to move forward. Despite being constantly ridiculed as the herb picker and the forever D-rank adventurer, Cain never let the insult stop him from helping people in his own way. Unbeknownst to him, Altena had always been watching over him, praying to the supreme god Audia for a chance to be by Cain's side once more. The universe seemed to answer her prayers when one day, Cain found a small statue of a god. From then on, with Cain's heartfelt prayers, Altena gradually grew stronger until she became the goddess of benevolence. Returning to the present, Altena appeared before Cain, and he could feel the warmth of her body. Cain burst into tears, and neither could hold back their emotions at being reunited after 2 decades apart. Altena teased him for being a grown man who was still a crybaby. Cain took this opportunity to beg for her forgiveness for being unable to protect her. Altena placed a hand on his cheek, reminding Cain of his promise that he wouldn't blame himself for her fate. From the evil dragon and Snakehead's minions to the ogre king, Cain asked Altena how many times she had saved him. Instead of answering, Altena thanked Cain for his ceaseless prayers, which had given her the strength to protect him one last time. They shared one last embrace before Altena said her goodbyes. As she began to fade away, she reminded him that the noisy kids were coming. Just as she vanished, Cain was startled to find Safiria still clinging to him tightly, gleefully enjoying the moment. Just then, Maya and Anastoria appeared, stunned by the sight. Sylvia apologized for being unable to stop the two, but she wasn't too bothered, as the ritual was already complete. Anastoria was petrified, while Maya questioned Safiria for breaking her promise. After stressing that she hadn't agreed to anything, Safiria reassured everyone that Cain would now have enough power to stop the evil god. While the tension in the room was still high, someone unexpectedly called for Sylvia. It turned out to be a messenger from Fort City, requesting Sylvia's presence at an emergency council meeting. Everything descended into chaos when they learned that about 5,000 monsters were about to invade the town. In a state of high alert, the guards at Fort City prepared for battle against the thousands of approaching monsters. The captain of Fort City urged his soldiers not to be overwhelmed by the enemy's numbers, wondering if this grave situation was related to the revival of the evil god. As soon as the horses were ready, he ordered his soldiers to evacuate the people of Ern to the capital city. Knowing that the saintess was risking her life to seal the evil god, the captain worried that their forces would not be enough to face this terrible threat. As he felt his body tremble, the lieutenant asked if he was afraid. Regaining his composure, he reminded the soldiers that any survivors would be promoted for getting through this battle. As the monsters began to approach the fortress, they decided not to wait for reinforcements and to engage them immediately. Meanwhile, at the council meeting, Walter, the council spokesman, declared a full-scale evacuation. He noted that although Fort City's forces were doing their best to hold back the monsters, reinforcements from the capital would not arrive in time. With a shortage of carriages and many sick, injured, and children needing to be evacuated, the meeting descended into chaos. All the while, Anastoria remained silent, observing. Maya raised her hand, and with her was Georg, the adventurer's guildmaster. Maya proposed evacuating the populace toward the northern border, arguing that if they redirected the evacuation, it would be an easier path for those without transportation. To ensure their safety, she suggested an escort from the town guard or D-rank adventurers. Then, Maya revealed the greatest challenge they were facing: the revival of the evil god on Mount City. As most of the room reacted with astonishment to this news, Maya reassured them that the Rosen Maidens would be willing to help. She detailed her plan, assigning reinforcements from the capital and high-rank adventurers to deal with the monster horde, while her own group would handle the evil god. Guildmaster Georg was put in command of the units. While Walter was flustered, Anastoria finally spoke, giving her instructions. First, she reminded Walter that he was free to state his opinion. Then, she unexpectedly announced that the D-rank adventurer, Cain, would be joining their mission, causing the room to erupt in protest.